I've just been informed by the chef that they've had some problem in the kitchen and it's going to take a bit of more time to get the dinner out. So I hope all of you have the patience to be with us for another 2 hours. Is that fine? Now, if we have to make this really interesting and exciting for all of us, it's not just the wonderful panel that I have here. And by the way, a great warm round of applause to the panel. I'd like to invite all of you to be a part of this conversation as well. So do I have your approval, please, everyone here? We're all happy to contribute here this evening. It's a long evening, right? Okay, great. So let's get this started. How many of us here are very motivated by digital transformation? If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to tell your boss, all right? This guy belongs to the Paleolithic age. I don't know what he's doing in your organization, right? Each one of us is highly motivated by digital transformation. But if we have to make digital transformation work, there are a few ingredients that have to come together. And one of those important ingredients is the collaboration between development, security, and operations. And this has to be embellished by automation and AI. And if we are able to do this successfully, then and only then are we going to be able to drive successful digital transformation projects. Do you all agree with me? Sounds very simple, very difficult to do. Now, Prasanna was talking about security, right? You said security is important, invest in security, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also said somebody in the audience told you, whispered, don't have enough budget for security. You know what's the interesting thing about security? The more you invest in security, the less secure you get, the less secure you believe you are. So that is the secret. So anyone selling you security technology knows that you're going to get more and more scared because you get to know of so many vulnerabilities. And I think tonight after Prasanna's presentation, when he said 99% of your code you don't know, right, you really don't know, gets you even more scared. But hopefully we'll get on the right journey at the end of this wonderful conversation with this very, very talented panel that we have here. I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. It's like an icebreaker question. You know, it's a question which you ask, the first question you ask a candidate when you interview the candidate. And what's that first question? You know, what's your name? No, you have the damn CV in front, you're asking the guy, right? What's your name? We got the topic here, streamlining DevOps, achieving efficiency, innovation, and resilience. And yet my first question is going to be, why is DevSecOps important? Now, we are all gathered here to talk about this topic because we know it is important, and yet I'm daring to begin the evening by asking, why is DevSecOps important? And Vasu, I'd like to bring you in. You know why? Because I just discovered that you can actually answer this question while doing a headstand. Now, that I discovered only a few minutes ago.
Okay, yes.
So,
and that could be one of the reasons why I do headstand.
That's absolutely. So, we're going to leave it to you. You can choose any yoga pose that you like. We live in a free world, but love to hear your views on why do you think DevSecOps is important?
Thank you, Mr. Manoj. Good evening, everybody.
Just call me Manoj, it's good, right? Thank you.
Thank you. So why do I think DevSecOps is important? Now, if we go back few years before all these DevSecOps buzzwords come into picture, now if you look at traditional way of handling security, there is always been a security team who does testing, and like developers develop the code, testers test the code, and then it goes to security team. And just before going to production, security team will turn up and say that no, you can't go to production. You have 10 other security bugs to look for. And then developers would now start looking at what are these bugs? How do I go and fix it? Like, how do I even know what I should fix, right? Then I need to talk to security team, and then they need to tell me what I need to fix. It's a continuous cycle of delays, right? Because I am ready to go to production, but somebody's stopping me that, okay, you can't go to production because you have 10 security bugs in your future. That's been a biggest challenge. And then it causes friction because security as a developer is not my responsibility, it is security team's responsibility. And they used to cause a lot of frictions, right? Now, coming to DevSecOps, what it basically helps us is that it's a methodology that tells us integrate security with your development lifecycle, throughout your development lifecycle, right? You're starting from the coding itself, where you can start while you are writing code, while you are building your code, while you are pushing your code to your master branch or wherever branch, and while you are building your containers or pushing it to your CI/CD pipelines, you have security solutions across each stages of this development lifecycle. And this enables us to, as a developer, I get to see my security issues from the day one of my code, right? I don't have to wait for somebody to come and say that, your code has security bugs. And that's the biggest advantage. And that's where I feel DevSecOps brings the biggest importance in terms of early detection of security and faster to market. Like, we can go to production with high confidence that my code is highly secured because lot of automation tools integrated with my pipeline, and I have already gone through multiple checks in ensure that my code is highly secured. And that's where I feel DevSecOps completely changing the nature of how the security used to do, and now we are.
Yeah, sure, and we will talk a lot about the tools, but I'd like to bring Pruthvi into the discussion. And the only reason I think Pruthvi, I can bring you in the discussion is, number one, I just got to know that we are from the same alma mater. Obviously different generations, so I didn't get the opportunity to rag you. I know ragging is banned, guys, but at my time, everything was fine. So maybe I get the opportunity now. So Pruthvi, I want to see how well you answer this question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, I think like Vasu said, right, DevSecOps is traditionally looking at how do we shape things reliably faster and quicker without creating friction around the processes. And that's and if you see, you see in the last few years, right, many of the startups who are born out of cloud, right, and the time to market is one key thing for them, right, competing against different businesses in the same space. And DevSecOps helps streamline things and get them faster to market while ensuring that there is reliability, security, and compliance in place. Because if you look at many of these organizations and have compliances which they have to follow, right? And that's where I think DevSecOps plays a major role in ensuring that they can compete in the market, be in the market, and be the first player to get things out faster, but at the same time ensure that they're secure and reliable.
Right, thank you very much. So it's like designing the braking system of a vehicle. You have a great braking system because it gives you the freedom to accelerate at very high speeds, knowing fully well that, God forbid, if something came in front, you would still be safe and secure. Karthik, you've been advising firms across many diverse segments. What is your perspective? What do large organizations really look at from a strategy perspective when they go about implementing DevSecOps?
I think smaller organizations, they're very nimble, so you can quickly adopt to any practice that you want. But when it comes to large organizations, their structure is such that there's a lot of navigation that you have to do before you get to implement something. That's a challenge. Today we're also seeing that large organizations are kind of shifting. They want to adopt these newer technologies, right? And when you want to adopt newer technology, it's about a huge number of engineers. They have to learn a new technology. And this is not just about dev tech, but it's even in the DevOps space, right? A lot of emerging products, if you have to adopt that, that's becoming a challenge. How do I learn this tech? How do thousands of developers learn this tech? Because I was just talking to Ashutosh and he said, if I put a tool there, that's it, everybody should use it. If you have to do that, then the barrier of learning a new tech, can you minimize that? How can you abstract? How can you make it easier to adopt? I think that's going to be very key because there's a lot of new dev tech solutions that are emerging in the market.
Siddesh, let me bring you in. You speak to customers all the time. What are some of the issues that you are seeing out there in terms of large organizations and their ability to implement and execute?
Thanks, Manoj. I think for every organization, they have a defined strategy in terms of how they want to kind of look at DevSecOps. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. There is always a challenge in terms of a problem statement that gets identified in terms of the maturity at which the organization is. Certain organizations are tackling the maturity levels at the scale at which they want to run their DevSecOps operations. Certain organizations are trying to kind of tackle it more in terms of the kind of technologies that they want to incorporate. So we see that sometimes the problem statement is more around scalability that they want to address. Secondly, we see that it's more around different technologies that they want to integrate and work with. And third, which we are now seeing an emerging trend, is now also in terms of how can they look at consolidation. So there is also a talk of how they can invest less, which is in line with what Karthik was talking about, where I don't want to build expertise in terms of managing 10 or 15 different types of capabilities or tools. How do I kind of get the best of breed solution in the existing tool stack that I have already invested in? So that is also something that more and more organizations are looking at. So I would say that it's broadly spread across these three kind of parameters when we speak with our large enterprise clients.
So Siddesh, what you're saying in effect is that we are using best of breed tools within the organization as we start implementing DevSecOps. And that could pose some challenges. And I'd like to bring Ashutosh into the discussion. Ashutosh, how do you make sure there is compatibility? How do you make sure we can integrate these tools? How do we make sure that we can consolidate them so that we can deliver value to customers? I think there is a lot of merit in terms of large organizations doing what they are doing in terms of implementation. But I'd like to bring you in from a perspective of this whole thing on compatibility, consolidation, integration. How do you think organizations should do it? How do you do that for yourself?
I think it's a very valid question from multiple reasons, because if you go in market today and search for it, you find tons of tools. Unfortunately, we are living in a world of heterogeneity, which basically means companies do not develop these tools by speaking to each other. So every tool does not speak to each other tool. You look into the cloud solutions. We have 3 or 4 major cloud vendors, but none of them speak to each other. There is no uniformity across their APIs. So it is as part of it like maturity model, how you look into security and how you approach the security. Some parts Siddesh and Karthik touched upon. Depends on organization to organization and where they are in their journey. If they are pretty new organization, perhaps it doesn't matter to them. But like we are very mature organization from the product perspective, from the time we have spent in the scale at which we are operating at. For us, it is make more sense to have a set of tooling which is complementary in nature, solving the problem which other tool is not solving, and taking a tool which does one thing at the best. Now, if you use one tool for solving your problem of keeping your version control, so think of it, it is solving this problem. Other tool which is focusing on solving a problem which is focusing on some sort of security vulnerability assessment, whether a developer is using into his ID, his or her ID, to check whether code he or she is writing is good or not good. That tool should be a niche into that particular segment, because the topic which we are talking about is security, which is not static, it's dynamic. Today you do something and tomorrow the hackers figure it out other way to hack it. So it is always changing, always learning sort of thing. So you need a lot of research and effort from people who are developing these tools. So what I meant in short, tools should complement each other. Overlapping we can avoid, and see being a part, if someone is implementing DevSecOps, they should look how in each stages, which we have seen it in the previous thing, that how they are being used. So it can happen that one tool is having multiple modules, but it's a different thing. I'm not talking about that way. I'm talking from the perspective of the capability. One tool can have multiple capabilities, but are they the niche and solving the one problem effectively? And other tool is complementing that one. So that's how I see it.
So you're saying make sure there's no overlaps because that creates problems, and make sure that whatever best of breed tool you're using is solving one specific problem. What about compatibility? How do you kind of make sure that they are made for each other, particularly when you're using a series of best of breed tools, if you will?
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen practically if you see. So either you look for someone who is developing all these stages in such a way that they speak to each other. If you go to different manufacturer, you will not find that compatibility. It's difficult to find it because end of the day is like a very competitive market also. So usually what is happening these days, right? One product or line comes into picture and they are trying to solve all the stages into one suite itself.
Yeah.
So for companies, it may be easier to go for a vendor or the tool or product itself, which is solving all the stages as a part of the same tool. And it's easier because that way it is easier to adopt because you will find that committee, each module is speaking to each other without any hassle of implementation. The burden of team which is implementing is also not much. And the learning curve for engineering teams or team who are using it is not much because then they are familiar with this one type of deployment and they easily can go from one stage to other stage, one module to other module, and they can do.
Yeah, but then the downside is that you're not going to be able to use the best features when you go for a best of breed approach. Siddesh, I want to bring you in, and Pruthvi, I'll come. I know a lot of us want to jump in here, but Siddesh, what do you do? What do you advise customers? Because I think what Ashutosh has said is that, look, you go to somebody who kind of has created a suite of best of breed products, but again, as you said, that's easier said than done. So what is it that you tell customers?
I think 9 out of 10 customers have this problem, and this is nothing new what Ashutosh is mentioning. I think what some of the good players in the market, they tend to do is they tend to identify the common denominator. The common denominator is the one that gets the most attention in terms of what kind of integrations you need to build to create the ecosystem that you need to provide to your end customers when you're presenting yourself as a DevSecOps platform. So the common denominator is when you look at the entire DevSecOps platform, when you look at it from, let's say, a code to deploy journey, there are various stages where you need to kind of integrate and talk to multiple tools. So we know that, okay, maybe 5 out of 10 customers, 7 out of 10 customers use these tools in common, along with, let's say, a common version control system or an artifact management tool or something like that. So I think the endeavor of an organization like JFrog and any such organization would be that they will create such common plugins or integrations which allows the customers to make use of these existing tool stack that they already have in their ecosystem without having to kind of invest more in other tools so that they can run the show with the existing tools.
Yeah, I think the issue was, we discover a few best of breed tools, if you will, then how do we bring them in? How do we make sure there's compatibility? And you are saying one approach is to look at the plugins and then it's much easier to integrate that. Vineet, you wanted to kind of jump in here. Why don't you add on?
So what I wanted to add was that this is being solved by the introduction of standards around outputs largely, which allows for most of these tools to at least say the same thing. So that allows for that to be plugged into other inputs, which allow for a streamlined pipeline.
Yep. All right. So that's another approach that you're saying, that there is a drive to kind of enable some kind of standardization, if you will.
Yeah.
Though it may not be de jure today, but de facto it is evolving as you see it.
So some of these big organizations are pioneering some of these standards. For example, Microsoft is pioneering Sarif for vulnerability, in source code being able to specify where the bugs are and so whatnot, right? So some of the larger organizations are at the place where they can set up some of these standards, but it's not at the space which we would like.
Sure. And that's why you use plugins, as Siddesh said, then you come in and we help you till we figure all of that out. Vasu, we've started talking about, willy-nilly, we didn't want to, but we landed talking about challenges early in the discussion. What are some of the other challenges that you are seeing in terms of implementing DevSecOps?
So the first and foremost challenge that we have faced, because DevSecOps, like we discussed earlier, is a cultural shift, because security was somebody else's responsibility. Now we are asking developers or testers to start owning in each of the stage. That's a big shift in terms of the culture, and there will be there has been a lot of pushback. Like, why should I own the security, and what do I do with, even if I have a security, own the security, right? So the the way we have to think how to handle cultural aspects of security is that giving the awareness, making sure that engineers are aware what we are aiming towards, what are our clear goals and business outcomes by doing this, what are we going to benefit. And another set of biggest challenge that we have seen is basically the security tools provides a lot of false positives and false negatives. Now, even if you ask engineering team to own or developers to own the security, now there will be 10 tools and giving different reports, and all of them have different level of false positives. The missing accuracy has been a biggest challenge. And they would spend a lot of time in figuring out what is the right bug to be fixed and what is the wrong bug, and where a lot of time goes, actually, right? That's been another biggest challenge we have faced. And if you organizations had any legacy systems, now all the DevSecOps, mostly we are talking about all the modern systems in terms of microservices and containerized applications and so on. If organizations have legacy systems, now how do this open source tool can integrate with these legacy systems, implementing the DevSecOps has been another set of challenges, right? So, and another big challenge is that striking the balance between speed and security, right? Earlier, developers used to focus only on deliverable, right? And now developer would see that security has a hindrance to their rapid development process. And that is another big challenge we have come across, right? There are a couple of ways we have solved. One, obviously, give them the required awareness and trainings and set a clear goals. Like, we could say that what are we trying to achieve, and business metrics, what we want to achieve in terms of what is your outcome we are expecting. Also setting up a cross-team culture where team engineers from different teams come together with the common goals of handling security early stage, so that they all see that as my common goal that organization wanted to solve, rather than in silos, right? So yeah, these are a couple of challenges we had seen, and we had come across by trainings and continuous evaluation of processes, continuous evaluation of tools as well. Another challenge, like we were talking about, multiple tools, right? Now, if they don't interact well, it also hampers the productivity. Yeah, these were a couple of challenges that I would have seen in our implementation.
Karthik, what are you seeing with your customers? Because obviously you come in as a troubleshooter, right? So what are you seeing across different vertical segments, different geographies?
Yeah, see, our problems are very different because every customer that we go in, they have a different culture in the organization. So one solution does not help solve it for all clients, right? So there are clients who say that, I want every engineer to be adept in the whole DevSecOps. I don't want something centralized, right? Some of them say that I'm a large organization. If I want to implement a particular guardrail, and if I want to implement it this quarter, how do I make sure that this guardrail is implemented across the organization, right? And that whole change of implementing, say, just like, say, I invested in a new tool because I know that I have to now run these scans. Can I make sure that in, say, overnight, all my DevOps pipelines can get augmented with that new step? Can I do that? So challenges are different when it comes to different organizations. We talked about tooling that is kind of provided by, say, one single vendor, and that way it integrates better. But today clients are also saying, if I kind of centralize this and make it, one, how do I give teams the ability to innovate? Will I not cut that short?
And we'll talk about innovation as well
Yes.
in a minute.
So these are different kind of challenges. I think the most important thing is you should see how to codify your process. So if you lay out a process, can you codify it like we saw in the slide, right? Like those 6-7 steps. That was more on the artifact perspective. But if you look at it end to end from your build to release, if you lay down a process, can you codify it in the whole tooling? If you have to build glue code, build it once, make it available to everybody, have a way of centrally pushing changes on that whole pipeline. I think that's the way you will address it, and give freedom to, say, specific teams if they want to innovate, right? And then have a process where you can then bring that innovation back, like Siddesh talked about plugins. So maybe there are new plugins that help teams deliver faster in their technology, and then once it's approved, you should be able to bring it centrally into the ecosystem.
Right, that's interesting. Vasu, I want to come to an interesting point, and maybe Ashutosh, I want to drag you into this discussion. We've been talking a lot about security, and we've been talking about the challenges and the needs and so on and so forth. And I think Prasanna really set the cat amongst the pigeons when he did his opening keynote. Now, within organizations traditionally, and I'm sure that everyone here, how many of you have an InfoSec person or team in your organization? InfoSec, right? Old world reminds you of the old world, right? InfoSec team. So we got InfoSec within our own organizations, and now we have got DevSecOps. So Ashutosh, let me bring you into this discussion, right? You're a new age firm. So how do you deal with these complexities of old world InfoSec structures and new world DevSecOps? Do these two teams work with each other? Do they work at cross purposes? Do they step on each other's toes? Or do they just work in silos?
Yeah. I think it's a very relevant question from organization structure perspective, right? Now, if you see, definitely the area of InfoSec is pretty niche. A lot of experience is required to reach at a level where you can call it out that we are securing this organization. Now, how the security comes, right? Implementing these processes while development lifecycle is happening throughout SDLC. But what to do? Like Vasu talked about false positives, or maybe we are going to talk about feature gates, like where to stop, where not to stop, how to ensure that code is not going over there or not. If you are on cloud, which cloud you are on, which service you are on using the cloud, right? There are lot of things which are happening while we are developing software. Now it is very difficult for a person to know what are the limits, where to put the gates over there, what type of gate has to be done, what type of the key has to be put in. Now these are the questions which is more sort of governance questions, right? Or control, like what type of control should I put in? So if you talk about from governance and control perspective, this comes from large experience, historical experience in various type of issues and handling, right? InfoSec team is still relevant, and pretty much you can't see DevSecOps is a threat. It is an collaboration between the process which we call DevSecOps and the team which we call InfoSec. So this is a tool which InfoSec was struggling. There was a discussion, right, that while we put in the organization, how DevSecOps comes into place. So it is more about now this is a tool which a tool or process which InfoSec team has got. Now they can implement the processes which can help organization to be more safe and secure from the beginning of it. So you see, right, it is coming as a collaboration that this process enabling InfoSec, their governance and control at very early stage. Rather, someone was telling that they come at the last and then stopping everything. So that type of friction it is reducing. So I see a lot of companionship with the process and the team called InfoSec.
So you're saying complementary roles working together, one responsible for process, for governance, and the other one actually implementing it, executing it,
Yeah.
and landing it on the
One
ground.
is defining the boundaries, another one is implementing those boundaries.
So you're saying defining the guardrails is what InfoSec does, operating within those guardrails is what the DevSecOps team does. Anyone here has a different opinion? Please raise your hand and we'd love to hear your opinion as well. Many of you raised your hands and said, yeah, we got InfoSec teams, we do DevSecOps. In terms of roles, do you see anything different versus what Ashutosh has just shared? Anyone has an opinion you'd like to share? Pruthvi, let me bring you in, and I'll come back to the audience. If raise your hand, yeah, go right ahead. I thought I'll give you guys some more time, but thank you. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you so much. I would, again, compliment what you mentioned, Ashutosh. So Dan actually saying that completely.
Sorry, can you just introduce yourself, your name, please?
My name is Nayan Naidu. I take care of the DevOps practice for a company called Altimetric. I'm also an InfoSec enthusiast.
Wonderful, welcome.
Thank you. So to me, it looks like, as it's a complement, it's also an approach that we take in terms of shifting left in terms of security as well. Because as we all see, InfoSec team has been mostly called out towards the end of the whole development life cycle, mostly towards the right. And we end up in a situation where they become the bad people because they are saying that, hey, this is not going the way that you're supposed to go. Instead, what we are doing with the development life cycle, like, again, going more towards the product development life cycle from left-hand side, we are shifting everything in terms of DevSecOps to make sure there is a streamlined approach that is there, but also we are bringing in the tools which can help you out to do the way that you are supposed to do the work. The developmental activities that we are doing right now already has a mindset of security built in as part of your process. That's essentially where it becomes not only complementary, it also becomes more of an awareness. Unlike we used to talk about, say, quality is the only thing which used to say that everybody owns quality. Now security is also something that everybody needs to own. Right? That's an approach that I would say, that's where I would like to complement what Ashutosh really mentioned. Yes, it is complementary for what InfoSec team is defining. I think security becomes some ownership for every one of us. That's considering the fact that we are also thinking about how everybody keeps breaking the code, whatever we are building. There's a need for us to have an assurance in terms of the system that we are trying to build, and shift left in security is a key aspect when we are actually building the products.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, warm round of applause for the wonderful interaction that we've had. And I'm going to ask the audience a few more questions, so hope you'll continue to participate. Pruthvi, would you like to kind of share a perspective on this before I move to my next topic?
Yep.
And Karthik, you should, as they say in cricket, pad up because you're going to be batting next. Pruthvi, over to you.
Yeah, on top of, just to add on that, right, on top of enabling or having this separation of concern between InfoSec and DevSecOps, DevSecOps helps InfoSec team understand if all the guardrails have been in place, and they can understand from time to time if these are being effectively measured, right? So right from access or vulnerability detection. So earlier it used to become a big hassle for InfoSec team for any kind of an audits to get these reports out. So the DevSecOps team right now have all the, enable all the tools to ensure that InfoSec teams can independently work on understanding if the compliance is in place, so they can work on this compliance aspect without much friction and actually enabling them to move faster. Manoj, yeah.
Thank you.
Manoj, if I may add,
yeah,
I
go ahead, please, Sudesh.
wanted to actually give slightly different perspectives in terms of how we also look at the market and hear the feedback. There are two things that we notice when we speak with our customers. So one is, yes, as you rightly said and as everyone mentioned, and as the person from Altimetric also mentioned, there was an era probably 10 years back when the security ecosystem used to say that the maker and the checker cannot be the same. But now, if we put that same analogy into the current DevSecOps ecosystem, and we say that the maker is the developer and the checker is the security team, we are seeing that the security team is now empowering the developers to be more cautious about what they are doing from a development standpoint, right? Now, why is this happening? There are two things that is actually driving this. So one of the reasons is that more and more the CISO organization is becoming a part of the CIO org within the organization itself. Now, when that happens, there is a top-down narrative in terms of making sure that there's also an emphasis on developer productivity and developer experience. Now, why are we talking about shift left? We are talking about shift left because we want to make sure that the developers are getting the right experience and their productivity is top-notch. Because today, the top dollars are getting paid to the developers in the organization. So you are making sure that whatever they are producing is getting to the market in a faster rate and it is with less errors. So these are the two things that we are seeing, which is actually driving the behavior for shift left or the developer productivity or developer experience, or the reason as to why we are seeing more of a DevSecOps culture being adopted in the organization.
Right. No, I think very well said. And I love your maker-checker analogy. I think it makes eminent sense. Karthik, I want to bring you in, and we're going to shift to talking about trends, technologies, new methodologies. What are you seeing happening in the market?
I think this whole, DevSecOps space, it's evolving very rapidly, especially with the whole infusion of AI, right? There's a lot of AI buzz around business use cases, but if you see, there's a lot of AI infusion into the whole DevSecOps model. This whole thing about false positives, I mean, we've been trying to solve this for a long time, right? You just throw a big report at the developers and, it kind of runs into hundreds. What's really the one that you have to fix? Today there are solutions which will help you identify false positives. For example, AI infusion into your whole testing space. Some of the large organizations that we work with, they have like 5,000, 10,000 test cases before you kind of release a major component, especially in the banking, insurance segments. Today there are AI solutions which can tell you, based on what change you have done, what's the optimal test cycle that you have to run. And it's not necessary that you have to run this only in the fag end of the release. Can you help your developers run this every day based on the change that they've done? And that way your assurance, we talked about shift left, can this shift left? And that way when you move towards release, your risk is a lot more lesser. AI infusion into things like, today if you actually have any platform that you've deployed, if there is a standard build failure or a deployment failure, this debugging of why the build failed, why the deployment failed, reaching out to central teams, right, saying okay, pipeline is not running, things like that. There's a lot of AI infusion which can automatically tell you these are your top 3 reasons why something failed. It can actually recommend, saying that why don't you just go and look at this. And Gen AI solutions are pretty stable. They can actually give you good results with this. Also the part we talked about in terms of glue code, all these tools coming together, I think there as well, lot of AI capabilities coming in, where it's not now a big challenge for you to integrate the best-in-class tools, right? You don't need to compromise because you want everything to talk to each other. You can choose the best-in-class, and actually it's very easy to integrate these. Other aspect which is also an important thing is, Sudesh touched upon, the whole developer productivity area. This is also coming into the whole DevOps experience space. So how do you give a seamless experience for a developer, all right? They should not be waiting for, say, a pipeline to be available. You're starting a new innovation project. How do you then create this whole CI/CD, everything going into production? Writing of tests. Today, somebody's talked about coverage, right? That it has to be 90, 100%. How do you accelerate this? There's a lot of, the whole Gen AI into Copilot and things like that, right? So people are significantly using that to improve coverage of tests. That actually bring in a lot of assurance into your pipeline. So lot of AI infusion into the tooling, a lot of AI infusion into the whole process codification, security, false positives. This is something that's happening very rapidly.
Great, excellent. I'd like to bring the audience in. Would anyone like to share from their experience, new methodologies, exciting things, some new trends that they are looking at, they are planning to implement? Would anyone like to jump in and add? Yes, sir, please go right ahead. Please introduce yourself.
So Santosh here from DevOps Decoded. Our name itself is DevOps Decoded.
Absolutely.
Okay. So as he said, like Gen AI, so we are working towards that through our bots and all that. How do we enable? You said about pipelines, right? How to bring up the pipelines, how to do the integration. So we've already started. So you look at the environment, what is needed. We figure out what are the APIs available as of now, and then integrate them. That's what we're working on. And we're working with some of the large clients. We started it as an internal thing, but now there's a Japanese client. They are into IIoT, right? Industrial IoT. So heavy things are being done, and they're looking at more automation there, so that pipelines are coming up, and they don't have to wait because there was an IT team. You go through your PR. It was ages, right? When I used to work earlier, it used to take at least 1 month to get those things up. Now, within 15, 20 minutes, everything is running up and down. So that's what we're trying to do, and the bots are working out very well.
Excellent, fantastic. Just hope that the bots don't replace you. That's it, right?
No, if I don't do it, somebody else will do it. Right?
So you might as well replace yourself with a bot. And negotiate with your boss, right, for a comp for the bot, right? So at least you can make sure the paycheck comes home. Thank you very much for that. We have spoken about trends, methodologies, new technologies, and this takes us to the topic of, go ahead, you wanted to say something.
So if I may add to what we are saying, right? So we want to reduce our attack surface, and around that, slim images or distroless images are gaining popularity across the board. So the idea is just that you pick what you need, and that's the base operating system and nothing else, so that itself drastically reduces the attack surface. So false positives is not a concern. And an interesting development around this is something known as Slim Toolkit, which is gaining popularity, which is around observability at runtime to identify what are the exact libraries which actually get used, to be able to filter out more and more of these false positives. So while AI might help with some of the identification, being assured that what actually ran on production, I am not flagging any of that as incorrect. That I think adds value, and some of these developments are to be
fantastic. Yeah, awesome. I think that helps if we can reduce the
I'd like to add
attack surface. Go ahead, Vasu.
Yeah. So in terms of this new technology and trends, one of the new recent things that's also coming up very highly is that writing policy or security as code, right? Earlier it all used to be a manual configuration, or you have a policy, you say that your data need to be encrypted at rest. Like somebody who's implementing may not really follow the policy you've written. Now we can write a policy as a code that can actually allow or does not prevent somebody misconfiguring your cloud or misconfiguring your security posture, right? This is something evolving now. It's very
and just to add masala to that, you can also add infrastructure as a code as well.
I have like all of them together, right? Policy will prevent anything somebody is misconfigured in infrastructure code or can be stopped, or somebody is trying to deploy an image with elevated user access or image in default workspaces. There are many other things that policy can prevent the infrastructure from.
We have, as I said, we were talking about trends, technologies, new methodologies, and thank you very much for your input and feedback. And this leads me to innovation. Ashutosh, I want to bring you in. You've been rather quiet for the last few minutes. How does DevSecOps foster innovation within organizations?
Yeah. So maybe a little bit we think of what innovation could mean for an organization. So it is more about like bringing some meaningful new things which is out of the box, or giving some advantage to the organization. Now, to have those ideas in place and getting them developed and bringing it out, let's assume it is software technology company only. People need time, a lot of time. They need to do something and they need to fail and redo it, because this is where you can innovate. This is the cycle for innovation. And everywhere is coming on time. And we can skip like diversity, inclusion, all those stuff, right? But this is the important aspect.
Your HR manager's not here, so you can say all this and get away, right?
Yeah, and this
Okay.
month is also like sort of. Yeah, so basically I want to spend time on the time aspect of it, because try something, failing fast, and try again, retry again. This is what leads to some innovation. And as we have been speaking for almost like 40, 50 minutes, so the entire focus was on dev productivity, time to market, not having your releases stuck at the last moment, and having a reliability aspect into what you release, right? So that gives peace of mind to everyone who is working on it, whether it's a business team, the product team, or yourself who are developing it, right? Where you build the best practices from the day one. Think like from the day one, like when you are designing it, when you are developing it, when you're testing it, and you're releasing it, right? And that reliability is there. Definitely, you deliver it faster. Your velocity of delivery improves. Reliability in those things improves. The bugs after you release are very less, which means gives a lot of peace of mind, and definitely, in turn, you can spend the remaining time. And in fact, we talked about technological innovations also, which are also improving the productivity of engineers, which gives a lot of time and bring that aspect that they can spend time more on thinking for something new, try something new, fail, and fail faster. Because if you are trying something and it fails in certain stages, which is before you deliver, you can always go back and change things and again retry. So this is my definition, right, or my way of thinking about how DevSecOps is bringing culture of innovation, because it is giving a lot of time for engineers to retry and try things.
Very well said. Would somebody from the audience like to chime in? First, somebody who has not spoken, and then we'll come to somebody who has already spoken. Around innovation, fostering innovation. Anyone has a point of view? Anyone would like to raise their hand? Otherwise, we have a volunteer. Go right ahead.
Thank you. This is Nayan again. A couple of points I'd like to say. One is probably touching the previous question as well, which is essentially the trends that we are looking at, right? Many of the organizations, at least the trend that we are seeing when we speak to many of our enterprise customers, is they are looking for self-service model a lot. Why are they looking for it? Mostly because they want to fail fast, so that they understand if they are actually reaching their product goals or not. So for that to happen, obviously you need to have a mechanism built in. The self-service platforms that we are seeing actually are getting in everything that we have spoke about. We spoke about policy as code, we spoke about infrastructure as code. We used to mostly look at all these as service at least a few years ago. Now it's moving towards the coding part. Why? Mostly because that's the place where we can reduce the amount of defects that we can bring in. And if it is already available as code, that minor mistake of an extra space will not bring down your system, right? That's the beauty that we will have. The innovation aspect is coming into picture because now if you can fail faster, you can actually pivot from the solution that you have already tried for. So innovation definitely cannot happen away from what you're working on, because at the end of the day, if you're solving a problem, that's your necessity to fix the problem, and you know exactly how you're solving it. Now, if that aspect is being addressed with the DevSecOps platform that we are building, which is seamless and making our developer experience nice, where developer doesn't need to worry whether the logic is wrong or is the flow or the platform is wrong, right? Your innovation becomes part and parcel of your day-to-day life. So the whole trend that is moving towards in the industry is definitely helping and fostering more innovation into the system. And DevSecOps platform, having it seamless and making sure it is innate as part of your development lifecycle, that's definitely enhancing your innovation power.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. So we've spoken about speed, we've spoken about agility, we've spoken about new stuff. I'm going to come to you in a minute, right? We've spoken about lots of different things, but there's always this one 800-pound gorilla in the room which we tend to miss out, and that is regulation and compliance. Vasu, I want to bring you in, and Karthik, then I want you to jump in. How do we make sure that we are meeting the regulatory compliance needs of the industries that we are a part of or our own businesses as we start moving at a very rapid pace by leveraging strategies like DevSecOps?
Yeah, so the first and primary focus or priority is to aware what are the regulations as a business we need to be comply with, right? Most of the time that becomes the biggest challenge for teams to know, okay, should I be compliant with, is it ISO standard or SOC standards, or is it PCI DSS or HIPAA or GDPR? Like every country has their own regulations. In addition to that, now we have like RBI regulations, right? Now knowing where I should scope, and in a regulated industry like fintech companies, it becomes even more challenge because we need to be compliant with all the most security or the regulations that are in place, right?
Vasu, do you even know all the regulations that you need to comply to?
Yeah, it is like 100-page documents that RBI keep updating every now and then.
When you say every now and then, it's every day it's getting updated.
It's keep changing, right? So, and then we need to deal with, okay, every complaint comes with additional cost, right? Compliance is always additional cost. And if you look at what has happened in recent industries like in Paytm case or Kotak Mahindra case, because it has to be additional cost and people tend to lose the business, right? And keeping up to that, what expected compliance regulations is been biggest challenge, right? First, knowing awareness about what complaints I should be compliant with, rely on, and then figuring out what are the tools that will help me to be on top of what the meeting the standards or be comply with these standards, right? Now this is where DevSecOps is really helping. The tools that we integrate in the whole entire pipeline, protecting the vulnerabilities or whatever the security bugs reaching into our cloud infrastructure can be prevented upfront, and we can set up a monitor bar each of the compliance standards. Like the enterprise tools that provides the end-to-end support can give a very good visibility around what is your compliance standard and where are you, how do you want to move the needle, right? Each of this compliance standard I was talking about, we can set up a monitoring dashboard and give the visibility to team that where we are lacking, how we should move the needle. So come up, plan around where we have to move the needle. First is priority, and then visibility, observability, and then plan around how we should move the needles. Now this is a tooling part of it, right? There's always a process part of it. Compliance comes with additional process part of it. Now this is where the new emerging technologies or emerging industry things that comes into play, where like policy as a code that I was talking about can influence heavily improving the cloud security posture, and that is really a good value add that we are seeing, where it is helping us to improve our whole compliance regulations and standards in terms of the coverage and reports. So yeah, this is.
Thank you. Karthik, you wanted to come in. Now, in addition to whatever comment you want to make, I want to very quickly move to the next topic, and that's my favorite topic, and you've been trying to kind of play a bit safe on that, but we will open that to the audience in a minute after you finish with your comment.
So two things, I think, talked a lot about industry compliance. Some of the clients that I work with, they have this challenge at the end of the year. There's an auditing company, they ask them to prove, saying, can you give me a trace that every deployment that went into production through the year has gone through your process? Right? How do you prove this? This is a big challenge. And organizations which have like 3,000, 5,000 engineers spread across geographies, countries, right? How do they prove this? And these are clients who have been on this DevSecOps journey for like 5+ years, right? They've been doing very well, but when it comes to this, I mean, there is no single answer. So it's important that when you plan this whole automation release, right, everything to production, you should have the ability to trace. And this is not just about tracing the flow of like an artifact, which we saw, in the keynote address. It's also about, for example, teams are also in silos, right? I mean, who deploys to production? There is a team which has access. Not every developer can actually deploy to production, or maybe even to the staging. Do we know who changed, say, a credential for deployment in a particular pipeline. Is that person authorized? Can you trace that, right? Who did you now authorize to deploy to, say, a staging environment? So can you trace all of this? Your entire policy, did somebody change the policy? So he talked about setting a policy, but can you trace who changed the policy? You say you improved the percentage of coverage. You said 70% this quarter, you said next 80%, 90%, right? If there is an exception, can you trace it? So I think the whole compliance aspect should come into this angle as well, because that kind of gives you that assurance. Otherwise, what goes into production, I think there itself you have a security vulnerability. The other aspect I just wanted to touch upon briefly on the innovation that we talked about. See, what we've done is for you to innovate faster, like Prasanna said, 90% of the code is actually already existing. How do you make that available to teams? So there are two aspects to this that we did. One, your basic open source libraries, components, right, which you want teams to use. So can you take that through a process and make it available to anybody who wants to use it, right? Second, as an organization, you're developing a lot of code, and that code is specific to your domain, your business. How can people reuse that? So if somebody's developed a module, somebody's sitting in another office in another geography, but in the same company, do they have access to that module which takes care of a particular functionality? And we built a store, we called it a store, and we had a process. So any code module that goes into that store goes through the process, so it is clean, secure, all of that, and then it's available. So if you are innovating, you don't need to start from scratch. You know what somebody else has developed for the same domain, and then you accelerate that. So that's also an important element from a DevOps ecosystem that you should kind of make it available to the engineers.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is that as you build your knowledge management systems, which you have alluded to, what do you do with code which has been sitting from legacy, which didn't have the opportunity of going through the rigor of the new strategies and methodologies? I think that's another area which organizations will have to contend with, because you got reusable code coming in from the last 30, 40 years, particularly for organizations like yours. Ashutosh, you wanted to jump in before I put Karthik on the spot on one issue, which he is trying to...
On the compliance side, we talked about tool. Maybe I don't have to take a name, but it's a challenge. Compliance have not changed. Basically, the way they collect the evidences, the way they reach out to you is still the same, which has been happening for last 20, 25 years. So this is not good. It's not easier for people to do the same thing manually and collect evidence. It's an important aspect of DevSecOps tooling, where the vendors who are developing such tooling, they have to solve this problem that these evidences which are being collected, it's not just tool is certified for PCI. It is more about, it gives evidences which you just talked about for any particular audit as well, which is not many people are doing. So
you're saying that that's an important piece which which certainly the tool developers should look at.
Incorporate into DevSecOps tooling.
Sure, fantastic. And I think there can be an audit which I'm sure the Big Four are going to be delighted that they can do if such opportunities exist for them. All of us sitting in this room have a common passion, and the passion is around DevSecOps. And I'm glad that we've had the honor and opportunity of coming together thanks to ET and JFrog, as we are saying, raising the bar and I would say carrying the flag here. My question, and that's why I wanted to come back to Karthik, and we were kind of discussing on how to bring this up, is that I find lots of communities today, hundreds and thousands of communities. There are communities on parenting. There are communities on beauty. Lots of communities out there on yoga. Vasu, you agree, right? Lots of communities. I just wanted to catch him, right? He was on his phone, right? That was just my way of getting his attention, which I'm sure you guys figured out. And then, there are communities on recipes and cooking, which I'm sure many of us are a part of. What about DevSecOps, particularly given the fact that we are all in the Silicon Valley of India, here in Bangalore, right, where we are proud of just not our own homegrown tech firms, but also many global firms and many, many startups. This is the boiling pot of innovation, if you will. And I was asking Karthik, what about creating a DevSecOps community? And I wonder why, if the community exists, I stand to be corrected, but if not, just wanted your views on how do you think we should go about it?
See, I think there is a generic approach to building a community, so I don't want to talk about that, like any domain, any specific focus area that you take. However, when you look at DevSecOps as a space, today most clients, they actually have a challenge of measuring the success or to gamify your whole metrics ecosystem around DevSecOps. Right? Today, you can actually go to, say, a security scanning tool, and then you can see your security score or your posture. You can go to a code quality tool. So there are a whole number of tools, right? And this is how we look at what is it, what are the scores, what is the metric. So I think there is a way to gamify this. There are a lot of interesting metrics, like people talk about DORA metrics, but there is a whole set of insights that you can actually derive by connecting all these tools. And there's a lot of data with each of these tools. If you can curate that, there's a lot of insights you generate which you can gamify. So today, for organizations, we actually help them gamify this. So people in a portfolio, they can actually see some kind of a score which says that from a CI standpoint, right, they're actually adopting 80% of the practices that I've actually laid out. And there's whole reward recognition mechanism that we put in place, and then people get to see that, okay, what have I adopted? And it also correlates. So once you see teams, individuals adopting these practices, you see the key metrics moving. For example, there are more deployments that they do. Their deployments are more secure. Lesser issues come out in their applications. So I think building community, you need to have the ability to gamify, bring these metrics visibility to everybody. It's not just about measuring somebody, but it is about showing them how you are in that journey of, say, a DevSecOps maturity.
Yeah, and I would like to encourage all of you in this room really to find ways, meeting after this event, and figure ways out in which you can go and build communities. We are almost at the end of our time together, but before I close, Sudesh, you want to add something?
Yeah, sorry, Manoj.
But then you need to take the ownership of building the communities, right? Because
well, we are already in some shape or form. Hence, I wanted to add to what Karthik was saying. I think just to kind of throw some light in terms of the community aspect to what JFrog has been contributing in. So I think JFrog started its journey way back in, I think, 2008, and it started as a community project. It started as an open source project, and since then, our founders and our CEO today are still very committed to kind of making sure that we contribute back to the community and we make the community more enabled and aware about all the things. This is something that we do. It's not just something that we just talk about. We actually practice it by doing such community workshops in our office site itself, whether it's a Kubernetes day or whether it is a AWS user group meet, or let's say it's any kind of meetup. It's always to kind of talk in general about different trends in the technology space, and also about educating the young guns that are now getting ready to kind of contribute to the economy of the country. I think that's something that JFrog has already been doing in some shape or form. So I just wanted to add to the point that Karthik mentioned. And to his point, I think it's very important, how do we make the younger group or the community interested to kind of be participative? And that's where I think the gamification aspect.
But I think it's about bringing everyone together, and how do you make sure the community is not just one vendor specific, but very neutral, where you bring everyone's common intellect together and play an important role in terms of driving all of that. As we bring this to a close, I just have a quick 30-second question for folks on the panel. How do we make DevSecOps a CEO agenda item? We've spoken about the importance of DevSecOps in terms of driving digital transformation, but is it on the table of our CEO? Is it something that our CEO reviews? Does the CEO of the organization see this as something important? And if not, what is it that we can do different to take it right to the top management agenda? Would anyone of you like to? Suresh, we'll get inputs from. No, go ahead, Vasu. We'd love to hear from you guys who are part of businesses.
So that's been a biggest challenge. It is not in CEO's priority, right? It has not been until some regulations and complaints comes and says that now you have to, or they try to stop you, right? Until then, it is not top of their mind or priority because their focus is on business, right? I think one aspect that technology leaders in this space can do is that show the metrics of what is happening around, especially when you talk about the startups, right? Startups tend to think that they are not being targeted. But if you look at some of the analysis that is published, right? Startups are the one most targeted. Almost 40-50% are the ones they're mostly targeted. And startup leaders won't think much security first, right? So educating them, creating awareness around what is happening around their business, their industries is very important so that they understand, they see the metrics, they see the data. Then they can start thinking what could go bad. Like this startup were targeted, became victims. All of them, like almost 60% of these startups go out of business because once they breach, their business is out. Right? So realizing that is a key factor. In my opinion, I think the founders need to start seeing it. That my business, what is the threat to my business? They always think a competitor. Right? They don't think as a security.
Absolutely, Vasu. And I'm surprised given the fact that lots of founders are technologists themselves. Correct. So they're the first guys who should see it. We are at the end of our time together for the panel discussion. I know there's another session after this. Want to make sure that you leave this here on time this evening. I'd like to, first of all, say a big thank you to my fellow panelists. A warm round of applause for all of them. I think we've had a fascinating discussion. We started by a very poignant question around why is DevSecOps important? We looked at the challenges. We also looked at security aspects. We looked at organization structures. We looked at the importance of how DevSecOps can actually drive significant improvements in productivity, introduction of new products, velocity of businesses, protecting the organization. We spent time on looking at new innovations, new methodologies, new technologies. We spoke about innovation. And we did touch upon compliance and regulations, which are an important part of the being of our very businesses. And then towards the end, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the panelists. We touched upon a sensitive topic on how do we bring it right on top of the agenda of the CEO of businesses here in this country, and how do we go about building communities. I do hope that you found this panel discussion useful. I hope that the takeaways that you will take with you this evening will help you to formulate stronger, more vigorous, and I would say more fascinating strategies around DevSecOps for your organizations. Thank you very much and enjoy the evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give another round of applause for the esteemed panel right here. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, may I request you all to please stay back. We'll quickly check with the audience just in case you all have any questions. Request you to please introduce yourself, tell from which company you are from, and ask your questions.
All right,
yes.
Good. We'll take the questions then. If you're going to give us a few more minutes.
Thank you, sir.
Am I audible? I'm Soumya Datta from London Stock Exchange. A question to Manoj sir. I don't know how many people realize that we are actually talking to someone who is a legend, Manoj sir.
So kind of you, so gracious of you.
So Manoj sir, a question. I'm from London Stock Exchange, as I said. I worked in a company where you also worked, EMC Square. So you have seen IT industry evolving for 40 years, probably 40 plus years, right? So from your days in HCL Wipro to Cisco EMC, How do you see something like DevSecOps is going to change the landscape of IT industry?
No, I think in many, many different ways, right? I mean, if you go back 30, 40 years, right, what did we write code in? And I think we alluded to that. Prasanna spoke about it. He spoke about COBOL. And I thought that he would show you, how we used to write programs in COBOL. We used to compile them. And I was surprised to hear when he said 99% you don't write the code anymore, right? It was tough in those days. You wrote every line of code yourself. So I think beginning there to coming to a point where we are able to drive such significant improvements in velocity and productivity just from what software is able to do today is absolutely fascinating. I think the way software has embedded itself in every business is something which we had never ever imagined 4 decades ago. Today, every business is a technology business. People happen to be in fintech, but they're a technology business. People happen to be in banking, they're a technology business. I'm sure, Karthik, you agree, right? Every customer of yours, when you go there, they will tell you, oh, we are a technology business. We happen to be in retail. We are a technology business. We happen to run a hospital. We are a technology business. We are kind of manufacturing X, Y, and Z. Because we have got code which is embedded in every product today. So I think that's the big shift that I have seen, that today technology is driving every business. In the past, technology was a productivity enabler. So I think the fundamental form factor facet, application, use cases have changed dramatically. And that is why methodologies like DevSecOps become even more important, because otherwise we will not be able to meet the instant nirvana expectations of customers. And I think that's the second piece, right? Today, customers want everything, in double quick time. And we can see it at home. I remember like one of the apps through which we get deliveries, they normally deliver in 6 minutes in the morning. And yesterday morning when my wife ordered, she said, oh, they are saying 24 minutes. So I don't know what's happened to these guys, right? They are becoming a big company now, right? I said, no, I mean, there must be something and they've just got a peak. But she was like, no, they've become a big company. They used to do 6 minutes, now they're saying 24 minutes, right? I say, you've forgotten the time, right? When you had to go trudge to the shop and that took 45 minutes up and down. So I'm just saying expectations of users, expectations of customers have changed. And that's why everyone here is talking about velocity, talking about doing it in a secure fashion. So
thank you.
Long answer to a very short question. Thank you very much.
Hi. So this is Sundar Swami, again from Economic Times. My question is to Vineethraj. Well, we've spoken multiple aspects of DevSecOps. I want to touch base on the talent pool. Currently, there is a huge demand, but the supply is less. Now, you've risen over the last 5 years from a product engineer to where you are as head of infra and DevOps. So the first question is that how do you manage this glaring gap in terms of the talent availability within your Udaan? And secondly, what is the message to the mid manager level that how do you reach the pinnacle?
So let's take the first question, right? So on growth, that is something which needs to be cultivated. I think it's a myth that we don't have talent. It needs to be cultivated. So like any job application you see, you post it within 6 hours, you get like 900 applications, right? So I don't think it's a question about whether the talent inherently exists. It's about how do we cultivate it. And around that, I am grateful to have had mentors who helped me with that growth. And that is something which I would want to give to others as well. And that's the culture that I look to fostering within my organization, where we help engineers grow within the organization and kind of reach where they want to be at. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
What is the message to the mid-management, those who are looking up to reach at the top?
Sure. So I think largely there is a concern around the need for a DevSecOps team as well. I don't see that having been mentioned. Largely some of these are seen as cost centers, and that is something which needs to drastically change. Security is not a bug; it's a feature, right? So that is something which people need to consciously be aware of, and they need to start investing into teams which help with some of these aspects. And for that, the middle managers probably need to talk to their upper management, but that's the way I see it.
Thank you.
Myself, Ravi Kumar Gare from Element Technologies. Thanks, panel and Manoj, having a wonderful conversation. So, when I follow this conversation, we are talking about DevSecOps in general, okay. But today, in IT world, trends are like, AI, generative AI, okay. We are training our models with a lot of data from internet, contextual from our organization, and then expecting, recommendations output from our, missions, right? So what is the role of DevSecOps when it comes to, these advanced technologies, AI, Gen AI? That is my first question. And second question, the important question what Manoj sir raised, the CEO role, okay? That's where we have a lot of, compliance regulatory bodies, right? Like SOX, ISO, NIST. How these compliance bodies are really coming up with, evolution of DevSecOps, which can complement to the, whatever, problems that we are today, facing. So anyone can answer.
Yeah, so I think, Karthik, you had touched on that topic on Gen AI, when we were talking about innovation, and Vasu, you had touched on the topic on the compliance side as well. So maybe you can just augment both of you, one after the other.
Very good question. What we did is we actually developed a platform ourselves because we felt there were a lot of white spaces. One of the things that we do as part of the roadmap is to constantly bring plugins and I would say template pipelines for new technologies that are coming up. So what we are doing now is actually from a AI perspective. So if you have to train an LLM and then make it work for a particular use case, there are certain tools you use. So what we did is we now building plugins to all those tools and building a process flow. So if somebody wants to now start creating a solution with AI, then it's not just about knowing what Python script or anything that you have to write, but can you just click, go through this process, and then you're sure that, okay, for a Gen AI solution, I have a codified process and I'm going through it. So that's something that we are doing. I don't recall all the tool names, but that's the way you can do it. So tomorrow, if you have different teams innovating on this, they don't need to figure out, okay, is my solution ready?
Okay. So here, for this process, what you are defining, is there any controls that we are following from regulatory bodies also? Because I have not seen so far SOX or ISO coming up, any such controls for AI, generative AI kind of use cases. That's where I would like to, understand that thing.
Yeah. So that is evolving. I don't remember the ISO number, but recently Infosys was one of the first organizations where we got certified on the ISO for Gen AI. So that's also in place now. But when you look at specific solutions, I think the whole ability to test a solution, the bias, the whole aspect of responsible AI, as a space, I think that's still evolving. Every company has put a framework in place, right? When you say responsible AI, what does it mean? So there is no like golden, standard for this, but it is evolving, and there are, best practices.
Sorry, and the government's also going to come up with regulation around. We know that EU has already come out with regulation, so countries are going to do it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Let's give yet another big round of applause. Thank